Silver and Black React. I'm James Pledger. He is Carl Schoening. We are about to break down tonight's game against the Orlando Magic. Now, Carl, as we sit, Orlando seems like a slump buster. But with Jakob Poeltl in health and safety protocols, we have seen that they have been victimized, at least in the low block. Do you expect more of what you saw in Game 1 against Orlando, or do you expect a much closer matchup this week?
The Spurs seem to play to the level of their competition, with the exception of that season opener, home opener against the Orlando Magic. So, in a way, I don't really think that there will be a blowout fairly often, but if it were going to happen, it would be against the, as we've been calling him jokingly around, the station here, the slump busters of Orlando, and then Sunday they go up against the Thunder. So if the Spurs are going to start a winning streak, this would be the time on this 2-game road swing, and then they have good rest until Wednesday. So I would imagine if there is a team to say, okay, this is a blowout, or at least a convincing win, then it would be the Orlando Magic and probably the Thunder on Sunday. But like you said, Jakob Poeltl, arguably the best or second best player on the Spurs, is still in health and safety protocols. We might not see him until sometime next week. And they need to figure it out. But as we have been progressing here, even though they sit at 2-6, I kind of projected them to start 7-3. They're starting to figure out who their identity is. DeJounte Murray's emerging as the number one guy.
He's the dude.
And the closer, which we were always kind of curious about who's going to be the closer. So, that's my thoughts on this. This is a very different game than it was week 1 because the Magic were also sort of figuring out who they are, and they've gotten a few guys back from injury. So now the Spurs, without a Jakob Poeltl at Orlando, I still kind of see this being a close game, but I would probably say Spurs around 5 to 10 points as opposed to only losing by 1 like they did against Dallas.
And, of course, you brought up the fact that their next game also includes the Oklahoma City Thunder, another team that feels like a win with where they are, but that's an Oklahoma City Thunder team that also just took down the Lakers. So
there are only 2 wins on the season of the Lakers, so I don't know. That might be more of the Lakers overlooked the Thunder because they had 2 big leads in those games too.
Yeah, but they
did still beat the Lakers in LA.
If you look at the Lakers, it's a team that the Spurs had a big lead on and also lost to. So, I mean, it's an up-and-down team, and that's what you expect out of a young team. You're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. But without Jakob Poeltl, who are you looking to step up in his stead? Because it showed when he was not in the lineup this past game against Dallas, and somebody needs to step up and at least help to account, especially on the defensive end, I think, to help slow things down for other teams in the front court.
Spurs Twitter has been clamoring for Jock Landale. He did not get time against the Mavericks. That seems to be the role of Thaddeus Young. Thad is sort of playing that high post pivot, not as much of a screener for the pick and roll game, but he'll still be the guy who hits cutters to the basket and be a big body that's kind of mobile, that can defend multiple positions. So it looks like Thaddeus Young will sort of have to fill in for the Jakob Poeltl role. Drew Eubanks got the start in that position. At some point, I would like to see Jock Landale. Pop mentioned that the concussion in the preseason really put him sort of behind being on track to maybe break into that rotation. Concussions are a tricky thing. You can still feel those effects for up to a month or 2 after getting one. So he got blindsided by, I believe, Lonnie Walker during the preseason, and which it did give a little neck jerk, and those are always scary and not always the easiest to come back from. And concussions, it's not something tangible like a hamstring or a sprain, but it's more of a kind of okay? Are you finally ready to go, or is your head clear? Or is your neck feeling okay? All of those things can really come into it. So hopefully Jock Landale comes back, but while he's cleared to play, it doesn't necessarily mean he's ready to play, if you get my drift.
Carl Schoening joining us here on Silver and Black React. I'm James Pledger. As we look at the Spurs' next couple of games here as we get through the weekend, what is your expectation of where the Spurs stand after this weekend?
2 more wins. I do have both of these in pencil down as wins. That's going to obviously come down to they're going up against other young teams. This is going to be the young Spurs versus the young Orlando Magic and the young Oklahoma City Thunder. We were talking about the Thunder in L.A. They say L.A. nightlife is undefeated. Well, it doesn't really work when you're not old enough to drink. So that's why Oklahoma City probably came away with the victory there. But, yeah, it's one of those situations where we know the Spurs are good enough to play with teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, who they played even with the first time around, and then they beat the next time around, and they played into overtime against the Lakers, sans LeBron, obviously, but that's still a solid squad without him. And their point differential's just negative half of a point. So even though they've lost the majority of their games, they're in every single game that they play. So I think that this is where they need to figure out how are we going to win. They know how to stay in games. This will be the 2 games that they figure out how to win.
And what are you looking for in those games that they're trying to figure out exactly how to win? Because we've seen and we've heard Pop, Lonnie, DeJounte even mention multiple times. It's these little things, it's these little mistakes in the game that have ended up coming back and costing us and haunting us. What are some of those little things that they need to clean up?
You'd like to see them take care of the ball a little bit better, but as I kind of mentioned, the more you pass, the more opportunity of a turnover you create. So turnover percentage is obviously something they'd still like to see down a little bit more, although it's not too bad. And then on top of that, they would like to knock down a few more threes. They don't really have a roster full of shooters, but they have a roster full of guys that can knock down threes. But the biggest thing that I would be interested in is that Devin Vassell, Lonnie Walker combination coming off of the bench and still providing a big spark offensively, because those are the guys that they're the young Spurs, obviously. I want to say Lonnie should be, a senior at Miami, and so should Devin Vassell. I think last year would have been his junior year when he was a rookie. So you're talking about 2 guys that are just now entering what is sort of the beginning of their athletic prime, and they should start to figure out how to put it all together. And those are the keys, because I think the Spurs' second unit can match up with almost anybody's second unit in the league.
He is Carl Schoening. You can catch him every morning on R&R in the morning, 7 to 9. I am James Pledger. I produce both Halftime and The Blitz from noon to 2 and 4 to 7. Check us out, and don't forget, you can catch everything on sasportstar.com. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Spurs go, or should I say, Por Vida.
Pura Vida.